everybody, welcome back to the channel. This is Bruce at the Bowski Studio. This video is going to be about not being afraid. So recently I've been going through the studio doing some cleaning and thought I'd bring out my plein air sketches and take a second look at them and pick a few to work on some more and practice my skills. So for this little experiment, I chose to go through all my sketches to try to work on, improve, and see what I can do, study it, figure out what I wanted to change, and I'm going to explain how I got to that point and why I made the decisions that I did. So this video really expresses the title of it, Don't Be Afraid. I wanted to take this opportunity to take all these sketches. I'm really doing nothing in my studio but collecting dust. I like certain parts of them, and I figured it was an opportunity if I wanted to try a different palette maybe that I've never tried before, a different painting technique, because they're never going to see the light of day, and why not? We always have to try to experiment and grow as artists and see what we can maybe apply by learning techniques or learning information from working on these studies. This idea really is an opportunity to get some knowledge. I mean, I might use one of these, even if it didn't turn out and I didn't keep it and I never framed it. I could practice things like maybe try out a new varnish I've never tried before. Why use it on a painting that you've just completed that you're really proud of, and then you ruin the painting, or it takes a lot of effort to remove that varnish and re-varnish the painting. So that's just one idea of a technique that you do with these plein air sketches. So don't think they're just ready for the trash heap just yet. We're going to try to bring them back to life. Okay, so before we get started, I want to give you a little background what happens when I go out and plein air painting. And of course, if you studio paint and a painting doesn't work out, you can still apply some of these ideas to that process as well. But when I go out plein air painting, usually my focus and the lighting is about average at about 1.5 hours. So usually when I'm out there, all I'm trying to do is achieve some resemblance of accurate color in the scene to bring back to the studio and work on. Working thin, I don't really apply a lot of paint on site because I feel it helps facilitate the process on site. When I paint a little thinner and the sun's out, the wind's blowing, whatever, it does tack up a little bit and I can continue working on painting and not getting muddy paint. So what happens is I have to bring that back to the studio and improve the paint application quality, among other things. And what I'm doing, like with this particular piece here, is once I got it home, because we focus on a certain element in a painting a lot of times, like, oh, I want to stop and paint these buildings. Well, what was the interest in this particular scene was that quadrant where you're looking right now with the power pole and the blue building and the yellow building. That little area was really interesting. So I had to paint in certain other areas, but over time when I got it back to look at it, I realized, wow, it needs some improvement. And this is where we have to kind of get gutsy with our work. We have to be willing to destroy it to make it a better painting. And there's lots of things I want to adjust. This, now I'm just working on getting a little thicker paint in areas on the building and build up that texture a little bit and adjust the color at the same time. So this is where I'm going to do that, because also what happens when I'm painting outdoors is I'm not using an umbrella. I've tried using them in the past and it just never worked out. When you have high winds, it's blowing around, it's very disruptive for me. So I've learned to try to paint in sunlight, or if I find the shade of a tree. So typically what happens if I get stuck in the sun, I've gotten a little better, but you can make your darks too dark. You keep thinking, like with the light shining on it, it doesn't appear to be dark enough. So I'm trying to work on that going forward, but those are kind of adjustments we're making here in the studio. So now what I'm working on in the painting is trying to adjust the pavement. It does take up a fair amount of the composition, and I want to add some variation in that kind of grayish paint, and trying to add a little more warmth here, a little cooler tones there. So overall, it'll look a little more visually interesting for the viewer. And I do that by having very close values and just adjusting the tone and color of that gray paint. And it seems to really help add some of that activity in that sort of area. Now one can argue, I mean, this painting's not very large, but One could argue it's like, why don't I just use a bigger brush and really get the paint down faster? But I really get, it really concerns me for the brush size I'm using for a particular part in a painting, because I don't want the brush work to overpower what I'm trying to say in the painting. And I like to have kind of a certain size brush strokes for a certain size painting. Of course, in larger format paintings, you can increase the size of the brush, and that does facilitate applying paint down in a large area very quickly. So there are things like that to consider. And still, again, working on the pavement, just trying to get little bits and pieces. And as I get a tone that I like, I'm moving it around the painting in different parts to add some connectivity to the scene, to that little bit of area. For this video, I spent a fair amount of time in the pavement here. The original pavement, the two adjacent kind of lots, kind of had a dip, and I was struggling with trying to differentiate that with color and tone for the viewer to make sense. It looked a little odd from life, and that's something I've learned, that if it looks odd from life, it's going to be very difficult to put into paint. Also, I want to mention, when I go out to plein air paint, right up front, I usually take a picture of the scene in case I have to work from that back in the studio for certain details I may need to construct the painting and give me information. In this particular case, the painting I'm working on now, I don't have that reference material. I'm just kind of remembering the scene and then also trying to make it a painting. What does it need? I'm not trying to paint a particular town in Maine. This is Waterville, Maine, but no one's really going to know that. I just like the shapes in the painting, and that's why I'm painting it. Now, it'd be a little different if you're working for a commission piece. You have to have certain information in there. But in this case, I'm just trying to make it a painting and adjust things as needed. And you can see that right now I'm working on painting the front of that building, kind of getting rid of that red tone. It's very distracting. The place is actually like a pizza sort of parlor, and I just thought the sign was the front of the building, the red color is very disruptive, so had to go. And we have to make those kinds of choices, like I mentioned. Don't be afraid. If it doesn't work out, wipe the paint out, paint it some other color, or do something different. Make it a different front of a building, whatever the painting needs. I felt the eye was attracted too much to that red tone. Another idea you can possibly do, like I have a lot of reference materials of urban scenes, so you could maybe extract out some details from another painting and incorporate them together in one you're working on. I haven't done that very often. There's been a few times I've referenced, like say a painting I worked on recently of Monhegan Island with shingles. There are some other shots I had of shingles. I want to get some detail to see how they're constructed to be able to paint them, have a little more interest in them when I painted them. So those are some tips too that you could use for your own paintings. Now I'm going to be revisiting, there's a little grass median between the two adjacent lots, and I just felt like it needed some adjustment. It wasn't making a little bit of sense to me, so I'm just trying to make some adjustments to make it a little more interesting for the viewer and for the composition, and wanted to kind of create a little more color in there also as well. You'll find that as you're working on your paintings, the painting really starts to speak on its own and gives you ideas. So it really is a push-pull, sort of like what you think the painting needs. Then you find that, wow, I should make an adjustment over here as well in color, tone. To me, it starts to speak a little bit and give you some insight. And it really becomes a fun process that way. Now I'm just going to be kind of working on getting a few little more touches of planes of detail of light, like the paraphernalia on top of buildings that we commonly see, air conditioners, vents, that sort of thing. Adds a little pops of light against the background trees. Now I'm kind of just revisiting some of that pavement area. Want to adjust that, get some different little bits of adjusting the texture, the color. So again, once I add a little more parts in other areas, I tend to do that. I'll revisit another area. Maybe I feel it needs a little more of color, value adjustment. So those are things we have to think about also as we're working on our paintings. Now I'm just kind of working on the sidewalk in the foreground, adding a little more saturated color to stand off a little bit from the tone of the pavement, and that gives a nice diagonal element also into the composition a little bit. I just feel that you'll see shortly where I think it's coming into the scene a little too much, and I adjust that to make it a little more less invasive in the composition. Just want to take a minute here. If you're new watching my channel for the first time, thanks for joining in. I hope you're enjoying what you're watching on my channel, and I invite you to subscribe. Be sure to hit that bell notification icon. It will alert you as to when I post new videos. And I just want to let everyone know that I'm really kind of been researching lately, doing some live stream, and it's a big thing I think out there on YouTube. Plus I think it'd be a little more interesting to have a little more feel like you're in conversational mode with people that enjoy my channel. It'd be interesting to meet some of you guys out there, so I am contemplating doing that. And let me know if what your thoughts are on that, if you'd enjoy that. Also, what I want to try to start producing are some really in-depth, from beginning to end of working on a painting. And my thoughts were of providing a painting that I'm working from, say it's a barn in a field, and something that beginners can really start to, if they're new painting in oils, can really wrap their head around and progress into painting the painting that I'm painting. And then have them send that to me, and we can kind of have a little dialogue between everybody of what they produced from the picture that I supplied. I think that'd be a lot of fun, and it'll be a little lengthy video because there's going to be a lot to cover. Possibly it might be broken out in certain parts, obviously, maybe 3-part series. I don't know yet. I'm still working on that, so stay tuned. See if that if I can work that out for time and editing and all that good stuff. So now I'm working on that roof of that big building in the background. And what I struggle with, I think a lot of painters struggle with, is like if you're working realistically and you still want to have a little interest, is finding that balance of detail and suggestive detail. And I run into that a lot when I do my urban paintings with the roofs out there and such, because you have different materials, but mostly it's like shingles. And what you run into is I don't want to have this linear aspect to my work of, you know, if it's really close to the viewer, you have to put in a certain amount of information, but no one's going to see really or focus on if this was a shingled roof and have all the lines and such. So what I'm trying to do to make it interesting is add variation in tone, again, like I did with the pavement, working with cooler, warmer tones and adding some age to that roof to make it more of a urban, gritty sort of a scenario. And I think it adds immediately a lot of interest to that section of the painting and the painting overall. I'd love to hear from you guys out there what you might struggle with on your paintings. If you're painting realistically, what's your challenges? I think that might also help feed into ideas for videos I might produce for you guys. Let me know in the comments what you'd like to see me address to help you with your painting skills for future work. As I speak right now, you can see I'm working on the little peak of a house behind the yellow building. And just when I'm talking about don't be afraid, make adjustments, looking back and playback and doing the editing, I think I'm going to paint that out. It doesn't need to be there. It's a little hard to explain to the viewer what's going on, so I'm going to get that out of there. Now you can see what I was talking about earlier. I'm adjusting this sidewalk because I just felt it was coming too far into the composition. And never mind that, I felt it was like an even amount on either side of the pole. So I want to have that variation of shape length. I'm really kind of try to be aware of that when I'm working on my paintings. I don't want it to look too odd that way. So that's what I adjusted there. And just adjusting the shadow, trying to get a little color into the shadow of that utility pole there that's on the sidewalk. Now the nice little things that I like to do towards, as you're working and progressing is identifying the shape more, giving it structure. And it was really fun working on these little curb protector. I don't even know what they're, so you don't run into the building as soon, but they're little curbs that they spike into pavement. And just adding those little shadows, poof, they pop out. That was a nice little touch I enjoyed doing quite a bit. Actually, what can make it very interesting for painting is certain little details. That's what I'm talking about, finding that balance of detail. Having those little curb things in there really kind of helps identify that type of scene a little bit. This is, of course, an urban painting, and I actually painted it on a weekend, so it wasn't like real busy around there, which was nice, and gave me an opportunity to really kind of spend some time with the subject and figure out what I want to include and simplify and all that kind of painting things that we have to go through in decision-making processes. One of the things I could suggest to you if you wanted to pursue painting some urban scenes and kind of enjoy that sort of subject matter, some of the painters that I enjoy quite a bit, they work way more realistically than I do, but is Richard Estes. He does some amazing urban paintings. And then Robert Beckley, he's out of California. He's passed away now, a painter from like the 70s. He did amazing paintings, really. And I actually like those better than Richard Estes. I think his work's a little too linear for me. I think Beckley's work is had a little more feeling into it. So those are two painters I can suggest for you to investigate for your own sort of painting ideas. Also, I want to mention too that I'll probably be trying to work on another video also about some of the tools that I use for painting, my brushes specifically. There's some new styles, brands that I've been using that I enjoy quite a bit, and I want to share those with you guys because it's always hard to find what brush is going to work the best for, what kind of strokes. I mean, I have bought so many brushes over the years. Some you hear from other people, oh wow, these are great, but for your particular technique, they don't work out so well. But I think I just find them very useful for some of my smaller detail work, and I want to share those with you guys out there. So I think coming up soon will be a video kind of doing more behind the scenes, more of my materials that I use in conjunction with my paintings. Now back to the painting. I'm working on, of course, the side of this yellow building, and I was hemming and hawing about putting in some kind of sign, just make up some kind of sign that is some kind of business. But I'm still kind of contemplating that at the moment because I think it has such a nice shape in conjunction with the other two shapes to the right that if I don't pick the right sign, you can really interrupt that flow of shape and what's the painting about. So I'm going to study that a little more, kind of contemplate it and see what I might want to put in there. But at the moment, just aiming that little window in there and a little punch of red on the door to pick up the red in the car that's in the parking lot, I think was a nice touch. So that's what I'm going to live with now. Now here I am working on the cars, and we're going to say right up front that I am not, for this particular scene, especially in the scale, the painting I think is 9x12, I believe. Trying to do a particular type of car, it's very difficult in this scale. I have done, of course, if you see my train paintings and my truck paintings on my website, you can see that if that's the focal point of the painting, yeah, I can work on that and produce that. This is just more suggestive to give some kind of story to the scene. It's a quiet weekend day in an urban setting. You got a couple stray cars parked around. Who knows why? It doesn't matter. Just nice little elements to have in the composition, and then working with, getting the shading on the reflection of the sky off the roof. All those little touches, and then little highlights, for the tail lights on the cars. I think adds a nice little crisp touch to the painting. Now, one technique I highly suggest, especially when you're working with a smaller object in a painting, is sometimes you get caught up with small brushes to try to paint that object. But if you want to clean it up, get a cleaner edge, go around the bigger shape around it and clean it up with that color. That can give you some really nice crisp control to really create the shape by default. I have used that many a times in a painting, and it really works wonderful. I highly suggest it. Now I'm just putting some very crisp little highlights, like I said before, for the taillights to pop those out a bit. And again, these are no particular cars, just the idea of a car is enough sometimes in a painting. If they were bigger, like I mentioned, focal point, I'd pay more attention. It's actually amazing sometimes how little detail you need to really get the gist of an object. Like working on these tires here of the car, just a few little touches like that. There's a certain value of that original tire tone, then just a little darker, deeper dark for the wheel well, and then I'm going to be putting in the hubcaps, and that's kind of, for me, again, working realistically, and for any of you viewers out there working realistically, finding out, gee, how much do I need to put in. It's almost like if you're taking a novel and extracting out 5 pages, what 5 pages are going to tell the story? And that's what I struggle with, trying to have that narrative story in my paintings. What gives the gist of the scene? Because I'm really not interested in every little element in the painting. I didn't stop my car or, walk around and stop and look at and want to paint it because of the whole scene. There was one little element, light striking a wall, or whatever it may be like that. That's what we want to try to maintain in the finished work. I'm going to be wrapping up the painting soon, but now I'm just putting in some sky holes in those trees. That's what's really going to bring them to life and add more interest in the background there, rather than just make them look like what I call cotton balls. You want to be careful of that. And if you paint those sky holes in your trees, make that value a little bit darker than you think of the original sky, because they're surrounded by the dark tone of the tree. You make them too light, they're going to seem like they're pasted on. And never mind just trying to put them in and lightly feather them into the color around the other parts of the tree so they don't look pasted on. So just another idea there. You'll find that working on your paintings is just a series of adjustments to find the correct connections to the tones and the values if you're painting realistically. Now, some people might push the color a little more here and there, and that's perfectly fine. It depends on your vision you have for your work. Okay, everybody, thank you for joining me for this video. Hope you learned a lot and you find the tips useful. If you want to know more information, just drop your question in the comments. Again, if you were new watching for the first time, thank you very much. I invite you to subscribe and be sure to hit that bell notification icon. It'll alert you as to when I post new videos. Again, thanks everyone, and I'll see you in the next video.